and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I have another special guest episode. I sat down and had a great conversation with another fellow death doula here in the Ohio area, Jenn Blalock. Jenn is down in Cincinnati, and we met a while ago at a death cafe down in that direction that was being hosted by Inelda, where we both received our training. But I'm not going to say too much else. I'll let you just listen to the episode. But we had a wonderful conversation all around how death doulas are the same and different all at once, and how we all have our specialties. And we dove a little bit into death and fear of death and dying and what all that means, and some good juicy stuff. So before we get into that, I would like to remind you, you can head on over to patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. You can get access to my podcasts a week early. You can see the video conversations of me with my guests. You get other great bonus content throughout the week that I put up there just for my patrons. So please pop on over there and say hello. You can also check out my caregiver community, Caregivers United. The link will be in the link tree in the description. It is a virtual space for caregivers to support each other, and I have great other content I put there as well, my blog, and we have different events from time to time. So come check that out. I'd love to see you there. But without further ado, I'm going to stop talking now and get on to today's episode with my dear friend, Jenn Blalock. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in again this week. I am so excited to have a new dear friend of mine and fellow death doula, Jenn Blalock, on the show this week. So Jenn, I'm going to give you just a second. Please introduce yourself. Tell my listeners a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay. So again, my name is Jenn Blalock, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have been a death doula now for 3 years, and the name of my practice or company is deathdoulacincinnati.com. Super easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
And I'll have
what more to say here, except that I was trained by Inelda, as you were, the International End of Life Doula Association.
Yes, absolutely. And I will put a link to your website in the show notes. So anybody listening who wants to check that out can do that. So what made you decide to go through your training and become a death doula?
Well, I think that is the magic question for every death doula, because we're going to have very different kind of origin stories or inspiration stories. So mine came forth in a dream.
Ooh.
Yes, I had a dream back in 2021 when we were full on COVID lockdown. And in the dream, like some dreams are meant to be instructive in a way that can change your life. And other dreams, they're just kind of more passive dreams, regular dreams. So this was one of those dreams that truly taught me and changed my life. So the dream was my grandmother, Nana, maternal grandmother, who died in 1984 at the age of 82, I think she was. She's laying on a cement slab which is like her place of samadhi, her place of rest. That kind of sounds bad, but it wasn't. And she's wearing a white nightgown, and she always wore her hair up in a bun, but her gray hair was just beautiful and on both sides of her. And I'm staring at her, and somehow through the ethers, she's communicating to me that she wants to be resuscitated. So I went over to her and I took my fist, and on her chest, I went boom, and then just started doing CPR. Now, I mean, it's like, I don't know how to do CPR, but I'm doing it in my dream. And then she wakes up and she sits on the side of her little samadhi bed, and she's just looking at me, doesn't say anything. And then boom, I wake up. I'm like, wow.
Whoa.
So I wrote the dream down, and
Yeah.
then I went on to do my morning routine, my coffee at the time um and going through my email. And so as I was going through my email, there was a newsletter, and I have no idea where this newsletter is now. I click on the newsletter and they have an article about death doulas. And I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? That I
Okay. I
was
think Nana
dreamed
sent that
about
to you.
my grandmother, and
Yeah.
she's having me wake her up from the death state. And so I read the article, and what the article just kind of showed me was if you want to be a death doula, there is a path forward.
Mhm.
And I think it mentioned Inelda and maybe one other death doula out west in California. And
Mhm.
I was like, well, how interesting is that? Delete, moved on with my day. And
Uh-huh.
then by the afternoon, I was like, oh my God, where is that newsletter? And I had deleted, the newsletter. I had a hard time finding it.
Mhm.
And then I got that article and then just started pursuing what it would take to be a death doula. So my interpretation of the dream, and interpretation is everything with a dream, is that this death doula, unbeknownst to me, just woke up, and it's my grandmother who brought me to the world.
Oh, I love that. Wow. That's that's quite a dream. I'm picturing this and I've never had a dream like that before. I've definitely had some interesting ones, but nothing quite like that. So what was your path before you became a death doula?
I was actually kind of actively wanting to become what's called a patient advocate.
Okay.
And just like death doulas are it's an emerging field, and
Hmm.
people don't really know what a death doula is. I
Hmm.
know, is that your experience?
Oh yeah. I get
Yeah.
that. I get a what now?
What? So that is like the starting point of our education, right?
Hmm.
And so same with a patient advocate.
Hmm.
But what a patient advocate does is, there's all kinds of people who don't have somebody to accompany them to a medical appointment when they have a serious illness. And,
Sure.
keep all the records, maybe even try to, deal with insurance claims
Hmm.
and just be there as the sounding board and the person who can help ask questions. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, what's interesting is there's a lot of crossover between
Yeah,
being
I was
a
gonna say
patient,
this is something I've done a few times.
yeah, like kind of that advocacy work.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to be, they do have a rather robust certification. I
Hmm.
was educating myself, and then boom, came the pandemic, where
Yeah.
nobody, if you remember,
Hmm.
nobody could even go to the doctor,
Yeah.
which, so that obviously hurt a lot of people not being
Yeah.
able to get the medical attention they needed. So then I had a full-time online job doing contact tracing for the state of Indiana for COVID.
Okay.
And that was very interesting
Yeah.
job.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. And then the death doula thing dropped in,
Hmm.
and I switched because it was such a calling.
Yeah.
Like the more I was just being drawn in, drawn in. And I feel like that is the story of so many death doulas I
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
They just feel the calling.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, when I asked you the question, I have been asked that question. I've lost count of how many times somebody's like, "Oh, what brought you to become a death doula?" And it's true. All of our stories are a little different, but I feel like in general, at least all the death doulas I know and all the ones I've spoken to or heard speak, we've all had that pull, like something has pulled us to this direction. You got straight up pushed into it though. It seems like a lot of us felt pulled in. You were like pushed by your Nana, which is
Yeah.
So interesting. But yeah, that does seem like an interesting progression. I have actually heard of patient advocates. And there is a bit of crossover. Like we don't have the same, obviously we're not certified patient advocates, but I'm always talking about, advocating for yourself and it's hard, especially when it comes to terminal illness, because this is where some of our overlap comes in. I've spoken with people who are still, a lot of my clients are still receiving treatment when I start working with them. And they're at that point where they're like, I don't think I want to keep going, but I don't know how to tell my doctor to stop because their doctors are pushing it. Like
Mm.
you have, and teaching them how to advocate for themselves or to help advocate on their behalf is a big part of it. Um, so within your practice as a death doula, I feel like we all have our own like little specialties. The one little thing that we're really good at with all the millions of things we can do. What are some of your specialties? What's your little niche?
My little niche. It's probably not little. Um, for whatever reason, in my death doula practice, I kind of initially thought I would work with older people
Mhm,
who are just via their age closer to death,
mhm,
and that's certainly who I worked with as a hospice volunteer.
mhm,
Many older people dying of a whole variety of causes. But then once my shingle was kind of out there, which took a little time, to formulate and get a website up and
mhm,
kind of get the vision for my practice. So who I am tending to work with is young people with cancer.
mhm,
And I mean, the New York Times just yesterday, which would be January 23rd, 2025, just ran an article about how young women are getting cancer at even higher rates
mhm.
than young men.
Yeah.
And so, that those are the people who I have been working with. And, so then what is my niche? As a result of that, I feel like there's some open-mindedness in this
Mhm,
younger group
mhm,
that might be a little different than the older patients, but I definitely take a more spiritual approach,
mhm,
and it's very holistic
mhm.
and a contemplative kind of approach. So there's all the practical things that we can do.
Right.
The advanced care directives, which that becomes a pathway into a deeper inquiry. Because I feel that if death is close for somebody, if death is there, then death becomes a teacher. And so it's trying to create safety,
Mhm,
receptivity, to
mhm.
see what is it that death is trying to teach you.
Yeah.
And it's scary,
Mhm,
it's fearful, it's intimidating,
mhm.
especially for young people who
Yeah.
have their whole lives ahead of them. And, um, but then, that becomes the essence that I believe strongly that death is a benevolent teacher.
Mhm.
But what it requires is us being able to just get over the threshold of our own fear.
Yeah.
And that one is if I talk about death, if I actually engage with death as an inquiry, I
Mhm.
could die, or it could hasten the process.
Right.
And so I'm sure you have dealt with that as well,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And I've worked with a range of ages so far, and I I would love to work with younger people as well because there feels like, all right, let me break this out. So it feels like to the average person looking in from this, that somebody who is like, say, my age, like 47, who has now a terminal illness and they're on hospice less than 6 months, they would have more, quote unquote, work to do. to prepare themselves than somebody who is 85. But I have worked with people who are 50 and 83. And the 83-year-old was the same, had the same amount of like preparedness mentally, spiritually, and emotionally as the 50-year-old. I feel like there's this misinterpretation that no matter how young or old you are, like you have a readiness. And that's just it's not always true. Now I absolutely have worked with people. I had a client who was late 60s. So she and by all means not that old. And she was like, "I'm ready, let's do this." She was like facing death head on. She's like, "I'm good. I'm ready to go." And I've had people that are in their mid 80s that are not ready at all and terrified,
Yeah.
you know. So, um
So it's everything in between.
it really is. And thank you for bringing that up because there's so much to do for people to help them learn of themselves, learn of their mortality, and learn how to face their mortality and with a sense of preparedness and peace. So
Mhm.
it's not so scary. Um, so personally, you, Jennifer, Jenny, um, how has your views on death changed since you have been doing this?
Hmm. Good
People ask
question.
me this all the time, so it's my turn to ask these questions.
Okay. I want to hear what your insights are as well.
Sure.
I think I am so deeply entrenched in that question
Hmm.
every day,
Hmm.
every day throughout the day. So there are so many ways to hold death. And, there's just, I think, more intensity when death is closer. Like if somebody has cancer, no matter what kind, from stage 1 to stage 4. If it's stage 4, there's more immediacy, right? More intensity. Whereas you can not have cancer or not be imminent or sick, and yet death is still trying to break through and teach us.
Hmm.
So I would say for me, I'm death is a constant companion in telling me what to let go of,
Hmm.
what no longer serves.
Hmm.
I when I went through my own planning process of doing my advanced care directives, so I could walk my talk over here. I'm sure
Hmm.
you've had to do the same
Oh
thing.
yeah, mine are good. I have a whole death plan. It's written. It's in a folder right over there to my
Yeah,
left.
mine's all written and communicated, sitting in my underwear drawer. That's
I
where
wrote my
my
death plan too, thanks
Yep.
to you.
Oh, thanks. Good. You did the
Yeah,
death plan.
I did the death plan. We'll get to
Yeah,
that in a minute. You
yeah,
keep
that's good.
going.
And so, um, that just doing that work in and of itself and then guiding other people through it, it's such a relief.
Mhm.
Like once death can be relegated to the less fearful place, like being prepared is one way to take a deep breath and just, I'm ready for the practical things.
Mhm.
So then the focus can be, my immediate inquiry now is I'm putting together a class to teach about a real deep dive into death. So that's kind of where my query is taking me. So more to be said about that as it manifests.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of my approach right now is trying to elevate death as a teacher and actually bringing death's teachings to people. And so that's what I'm actively working on.
I like it. I like it. So then let's talk about the death plan. What, in your words, what exactly is involved in creating a death plan?
Well, I think I'm not sitting here looking at the death plan right now,
Hmm.
but when I put that together, it is, just thinking of just answering all the practical questions.
Hmm.
And well, tell me what your experience was just going through the death plan.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I did mine shortly after the When We Die festival that where you and I where you presented about that. And I've already had my advanced directives. They've been done for quite some time. I did those prior to my husband and I getting married because everything was in my name and I just want to make sure he was taken care of, right? If something happened to me. So I didn't need to work on that at all. For me, it was more the spiritual side of things and the like how to be with me if I am in an incapacitated state and imminently dying because I don't have children. I'm not super close with my niece and my nephew. We know each other, love each other, whatever, but we don't spend a ton of time together. And if my husband's not around, if for something reason something happens to him, like how many people really know me and know what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with? So I was spelling out things like I'm not comfortable with prolonged physical contact. So please don't touch me a lot. I don't like a lot of people in the room and I don't like loud noises. So please keep things, it's those type of things, but also like how I did a little bit of my love letter, a little bit of my ethical will in that as well. Like here is how what I want you to learn from my existence on this earth
Mm.
for the amount of time I was here. Here's what I hope you can learn from me and from my life and from my death. And don't be afraid of my death or your death or any death. Like be present for this. Learn from me whatever you can, like that kind of stuff. So
Mm.
that was mine.
So, yeah, I love that. So, so what are your thoughts about your own mortality after going through that exercise,
Yeah.
and being a doula, all of
Yeah.
it?
Oh, look at this. You're interviewing me now. Uh, no, and I get asked this question all the time, like how my views on death have changed. And there's definitely less fear around it. And I've seen it. I've experienced death prior to me going down this path as a death doula. And but there was always this a little bit of separation, a little bit of unknown with it. And all the deaths I've experienced have been very different. Um, but being around it more, talking about it more, it's like anything. That's what I talk about with death cafes too. Like the more you talk about these things, the less scary they are. So I don't have that same innate fear. And I think a lot of that fear just came with my uncertainty of what goes on in and around dying and afterwards. And now that I've been around it a lot more, I definitely feel more comfortable with it. And I see it as, like you were saying, it's a teacher. Like we all learn from deaths. Um, one of the most impactful stories I share a lot is, and I've shared this on this podcast. I had a coworker back in 2013, so just a long time ago, 12 years ago. He was in his mid 30s, was on vacation with his family and had a massive coronary event and died while on vacation. Nobody knew he was very healthy, had an undiagnosed heart condition, and it killed him. And seeing people react to this around me at the office was fascinating because I had one coworker who he and his wife 2 months later, they go to Costa Rica and they talked about like maybe one day we'll buy some land. And they went down 2 months later and bought land to start building a house in Costa Rica. They're like, we don't know when we're going to die. Obviously, this just happened to him. So watching people learn from death. And I had the same reaction. I was like, holy crap, I could go any minute. Any of us could. Um, yeah, so it's taught me a lot about what's important and what's not,
Yeah.
which made it all the easier to leave that stupid job and to become a death doula.
Yay.
Life is too short to work in a job you hate. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, I love you sharing what your experience was around that, which is where I think some of the important questions are. The pragmatic part is, take care of your business so
Hmm.
that your family and friends or whoever's left in your wake make it
Hmm.
easy for them. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the most mundane
Hmm.
aspect of it, but it's amazing how many people don't even do that.
Hmm.
And then once we dive deeper, it's like, what is your philosophy about death?
Hmm.
What is it? It sounds like you really uh, dove into the deep end of the pool and
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
that done. Yeah, just
Absolutely.
to piggyback on that, just a couple other points. Like, so it's really looking at death as well as a passage, right? It's not an event.
Yeah.
It's passage.
Hmm.
And so here's what I believe, and this is, you know, the spirit in which I work with people, is that why are we so afraid as human beings? Why do we think that all there is this one body and this one expression?
Hmm.
Jenn Blalock, and Nikki the death doula. We're so much more than that.
Yeah.
And so the other thing to explore is what happens after we die. I'm
Hmm.
not trying to fill in the blanks for people on that,
Yeah.
but I do have a belief that our spirit, our soul, something inside of this body endures.
Hmm.
I kind of know that to be true. So then when that becomes the anchor point, how we die really can make a difference in what happens in the transition.
Hmm.
How we die and how we can engage death as a passage and start doing our life review before we die,
Hmm.
then we can actually affect the healing of our family lineage.
Hmm.
And that becomes purposeful.
Yeah.
So death is not just this thing to avoid.
Yeah.
It's not this like contagious disease to avoid. No.
Yeah.
And that we can bring these lessons in when we're not dying.
Yeah.
Again, for those who are dealing with a serious illness or who are terminal, yes, all this becomes so much more important, and there's immediacy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we do not have to be in a death situation to really
No.
benefit
No,
from the.
and I encourage that all the time, especially with my death cafes. Like, most people that come are not dying but they're just they are around it, whatever. They have their own reasons for being there. But I always encourage people to take some time to contemplate these things and where you think you're going to be and do your life review. Do it now because trying to work through all that when you've got 3 months left to live and you're also doing all the other stuff, it's like it's too much. You need to really spend time with it and sit in it. You can't just like do it in a week. It's not a checklist, and it's different for everybody. Some people can work through their whole life in a couple weeks and they're good. Some people might take them their whole life to get through their whole life.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody's a little bit different with that. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. So since I mentioned it, well, let's talk about death cafes for a second, because I met you at a death cafe, a really big one down in
Yeah.
Cincinnati that was hosted after one of the in-person trainings for Enelda. So how long have you been hosting a death cafe?
Well, I hosted them for about 2 years, but
Okay.
they're in Cincinnati. I'm kind of taking a break, but there's
Sure.
other people who are doing death cafes. So what I'm trying to build here in Cincinnati is a death care community.
Hmm.
So I've put together a newsletter where I'm gathering, all the different events. And I think you're on my
I
newsletter,
am.
yeah,
Yeah.
list. And if you saw my last one, it's like there's a lot going on down here.
Yeah, there is. That's amazing.
It is. And so I'm just trying to corral resources and really create a loving community, and there's quite a few death doulas down here,
Hmm.
that are trained. And then there's a lot of wannabe death doulas who find me, which I highly encourage. I like
Yep.
to encourage people and kind of help direct and guide them to the various resources. And what is fantastic is different doulas have different personalities and different ways in. And so, it's certainly not a one size fits all
Hmm.
profession. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to just help be part of building a community of
Hmm.
death doulas and getting the word out,
Hmm.
educating people about how a death doula can help,
Yeah. Yeah. We're same place with that. I do a whole lot of that up here. And there's quite a few of us up here in Columbus too, which is awesome. We have little gatherings from time to time, but Yeah, I feel like a lot of times I'm just trying to educate the public as to who we are and get the word out that we're here. But I don't know about you, I'm seeing more and more of it show up in other places because I'll hear from people like, "Oh my God, I just saw this TV show and they referenced a death doula and you're one of those." That's so it's more getting out there now. So, but I like to
Definitely.
think that we're paving the way for all the future doulas down the road too.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And I'm 62 years old, and I fully intend to do this work until at least 70.
Hmm.
And that is my intention, is to really help seed the field
I love
and
it.
see it grow.
And I've said that a few times too. I want to do the work. I want to work with people. And I'm passionate about it. I love it. And I am, and I love doing it. But if I can help make things easier for death doulas in the future here, then that's just as fulfilling to me because I know when I got started, it was like I looked around and there were maybe two other people I knew of as death doulas in Columbus, and now there's a lot more. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to start. Did the training. I'm like, well, now what? I'll build a website. Neat. Well, who do I talk to? What do I do? And just learning from other doulas. But if I can just make that much easier for the next one, my work is done. Awesome.
Yay.
All right. So I have a tradition on my podcast towards the end of every episode where I pull a card from the death deck. And I know you know the death deck. So
I do.
I love the death deck. So I'm going to pull one at random and then I'll let you answer the question and then I will answer it as well. So I'm going to do this on screen so we all know I'm legitimately
Good
not
question.
cheating.
We want a good question.
Yeah, we got a good one. Okay.
Okay.
Do you believe in reincarnation? A, yes, our soul returns in a new body to learn a new life lesson. B, nope, we get one shot on this crazy blue marble. That's it. Or C, I'm undecided. I haven't seen much evidence either way.
A strong A,
Yeah. Yeah.
very strong A.
Yeah. I I'm a strong A, but not in the traditional way where a lot of like I don't know that like you get reborn as a cat or you get reborn as yet another human. I feel like you talked about our souls leave our bodies. Like they're there and then they leave. I believe that we are stardust that go out and attach to all other things. So that's me.
Yeah, I love that.
Me too.
I think this is a definitely a question that is in the great mystery.
Hmm.
Like I don't, as at least for me personally, I don't think I'm gonna know, like know with a capital K, the answer to that question until I die.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of my own mortality, I have to admit, I think I'm more curious than I am fearful,
Hmm.
because I
Yeah.
really am so curious
Yeah.
about these eternal questions.
Yeah.
But I do feel that that potential exists to be able to come back and learn our new lessons,
Yeah.
and that's why it's great if we can make the most of our life, this one that I'm having now. And that has been my focus, has been my personal growth and development as a human, my spiritual growth as a human. And it's kind of through the lens of death
Hmm.
that my teaching is coalescing.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think I was another one of my episodes I was discussing this type of thing at the end. And I get asked a lot from clients and from other people like, "Well, what do you think happens after we die?" I said, I don't know. And I really honestly don't think we are meant to fully know.
Hmm.
Because if we did, we would.
Yeah.
Um, I don't believe necessarily that it's the final, like curtains down, close your eyes, and that's it for all eternity. But what it looks like, I don't have the answer to, but I don't think I'm meant to.
Yeah. I agree with that. Um, Again, it's just being held in the mystery.
Hmm.
And, that's the exploration, that's the inquiry. So if one can get over the fear, it truly is a very stimulating field to be in.
Yeah.
And then just from a really big picture of, well, why death? Because there are so many there are so many roads for similar explorations from a
Mhm.
spiritual perspective. But then it's kind of coming to me that why death is so important to explore now.
Mhm.
Because obviously it's not just you and I who are receiving this calling, and
Right.
that the whole death message is waking up in so many ways across this planet. It's not just death doulas.
Mm-hmm.
It's death education. I mean, it's myriad. I'm sure you've done a
Yeah.
lot of podcasts on all the ways that we're waking up to death.
Yeah.
But if you think about humanity as a whole, why is it that we're in the place that we're in?
Mm-hmm.
Fear. Fear holds humans back.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's so many ways one can be fearful, but it's the fear of death that is a lock,
Mm-hmm.
on swaths, huge, huge population of humanity. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what this work does, it's very good work to chip away at the fear that humans have. That kind of leads to not so great behavior. Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Oh my gosh. This has been an absolute pleasure. Jenn, is there anything else you would like to share with my listeners before we wrap up?
I think I would just hope that you found a tidbit of inspiration that Nikki and I have been able to kind of plant a seed that may find its way to flower and bloom in your own life.
Thank you, man. That was beautifully said. You, you ended that perfectly. Jenn, thank you so much. Again, I'll put the link to her website, CincinnatiDeathDoula.com, deathdoulas.com.
Death Doula Cincinnati
Death
dot
Doula
com.
since I'll put it in the I'll put it in the show notes so you can find it there. Thank you. This has been amazing. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, Nikki.
All right, another huge thank you and shout out to Jenn. Thank you so much for being on my show. You can find Jenn at CincinnatiDeathDoula.com. I also put that link in the description. So if you are in the Cincinnati area and you are in need of a death doula, please look her up. Or just say hey, because she's a totally awesome human being. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find me. I've got links in the description to all the things that I have. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear thoughts on the show. Please, if you like this, leave a rating and a review. Those are how more people can find me. Or tell a friend how much you enjoy my show. And you can always reach out through NikkiTheDeathDoula.com. That's it. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing week. And remember, as always, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid. And grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula is produced by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC in Columbus, Ohio. Nikki the Death Doula LLC is for consulting, education, emotional support, and guidance, and is no way considered a funeral establishment or licensed mental health establishment. Scripts, editing, sound design, literally everything with this podcast is done solely by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC, with the exception of the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. Licensing information can be found at filmmusic.io.